Welcome to Susie's Enchanted Crossroads, a podcast that helps you navigate your journey through the crossroads. I'm Susie, and together we will be taking a deeper look into witchcraft and spirituality. So settle in, and let's get this episode going. All right, hello, gorgeous souls. How are you all doing? I'm actually doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. Um, Stress levels, of course, I'm trying to get them under control because there's just so much going on, as there always is, right? There's always going to be something happening, something always going on. But I want to say that so I was just chit-chatting with, a friend and a listener, which is always nice. And we got onto the topic of, do you remember or did you ever have sleepovers or go to a sleepover? And I was like, hell yeah. I remember having a blast at sleepovers. And it's so sad that nowadays, it's, as far as safety for kiddos, right? Unless you really vet, parents and everyone who's in the house. I don't hear a lot about like slumber parties. I could be wrong because, I don't got kids at those ages that go to slumber parties. But I remember vividly a couple of slumber parties where we're I don't know, fifth grade maybe. And I do remember being at my best friend's house and we were watching a quote unquote scary movie. And that scary movie was Tremors. Oh, I know I'm dating myself, but oh my gosh. I see that movie now and it's so nostalgic and it's so dumb, but it's I mean, it was just so much fun. And it's just like if you go to camp, right? Or you are camping and you're out in the forest, in the wilderness, in the nature, and, everyone's around the campfire or everyone is in a circle around a flashlight and we're all telling spooky, scary stories. And a lot of these scary stories, are passed down. So it's the lore, right? The folklore. And some of these stories that get passed down are stories maybe that our grandparents or our parents told us. Like I know about what the chupacabra and La Llorona, and a lot of it was, kids need to mind their parents. And then you have all the other spooky stories like Slender Man, but we're not going to get into those stories just yet because I do want to get in. This conversation just sparked, another conversation with another friend of mine, just doing some research like, hey, do you remember all these things? And it's just like a throwback, right? Of like when you were young. And so at these sleepovers, in the dark, you feel your heart, pumping in your chest, the adrenaline's going, listening to these scary stories, whether, you make them up on the spot or you overheard, someone, passing down this story or was told to you. And then we get into the games, right? So we're all high on these like just scaring each other. And we started playing things like Bloody Mary and light as a feather, stiff as a board. And uh I know we would even see like Candyman. What else? What else? And if you were ever so lucky, you had the Ouija board. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The infamous Ouija board. And I honestly, and this is where I didn't even think about doing an episode on it, right? But it's a form of divination. And I was doing it. I don't know a lot about the Ouija board. I mean, I know what it is. I know what it's used for. I know that it was seen as, this talking board that's a game. And I always thought, I was like, who the hell thought that this was like a cool game for kids to play? You know what I mean? Like, seriously, we're advertising this talking board that connects to the spirit world as a game. But then to be honest, like I was really looking at games back then and I was like, well, I remember we would always play did anyone ever play the game of life? What a depressing fucking game. Um, so the game of life was this huge board and it had this little wheel in the middle, right, that you spun that had a bunch of numbers which dictated how many spaces you would move instead of rolling a dice. And you were in a little car, right? You picked your little car and your little person, this little plastic person, you would like just stick in there and then you would move across the board and then picking up like cards and it would tell you like you got a promotion, you live in a mansion now. Congratulations, triplets. Unfortunately, there was an earthquake and now your house is split down the center. It was just that game was wild. I think they still make that, to be honest. So, as we were talking about the Ouija board, I was like, you know what? Yeah, that is a good episode. Good job, friend. Good job, friend. So, hopefully you're listening to this as I get into the talking board. And to be very honest, as I begin talking about the Ouija board, I would love to hear any stories that you have about the Ouija board. The Ouija board to me is very fascinating. I'll be totally honest. I've never used the Ouija board. I don't know anybody who actually has a Ouija board. So if you have the Ouija board and you've used it and you have stories to tell me, and that you would like to share, please hit me up. I want to know all the stories about those of you that have used the Ouija board. I want to know, did you use this Ouija board at a sleepover? Did you use it when you were younger? Like, you were in fifth grade messing around with it, or, you were maybe in high school. Shoot, maybe you're in your 20s and you're like, I want to see what this Ouija board's all about. I want to hear from you, please, because this just totally piqued my interest. Okay. So, the Ouija board is basically a talking board that was first manufactured in the United States in 1890, you guys. I did not know that's when it was created, obviously. So, the talking board, this Ouija board, was printed with letters and numbers, and you use this little sliding pointer and it spelled out the messages. Okay. So, I'm going to read straight from my notes. The Ouija board, the board that became Ouija was born in 1886 in Chestertown, Maryland, and named in 1890 in Baltimore, where it was first manufactured. Since Ouija's inception, newspapers reported on its use as a way to communicate with the dead, predict catastrophes, solve mysteries, and even commit crimes. I'm sorry, commit crimes? Wow. So apparently the Ouija board's popularity grew around World War One. There was newspaper coverages, you guys, okay, on this Ouija board. So the Ouija's popularity grew in the wake of World War One. Newspaper coverage spread about Pearl Curran, a St. Louis housewife who used Ouija to talk to the spirit of a 17th century woman named Patience Worth. Miss Curran went on to publish Patience's writings, many of which were met with critical acclaim. Jaw on the floor. Wow. Okay, so I was like, okay, okay, let's see this. And yeah, if you go to Library of Congress, you can actually click on the newspaper articles with all of this information on it. It is fascinating. Okay. I highly, highly recommend you look at these. And those of you that are listening and you're like, what the hell's a newspaper? It was like the social media stories that, that were actually printed and put at your doorstep. I'm just kidding. I'm being really condescending. But do you guys remember newspapers? The news, the paper boy, or well, I didn't know a paper boy. I'm not that old, but like, people like I remember my parents would get the paper, and as we got older, newspapers were, losing popularity because everything was becoming easily online that, you didn't have to purchase. It was just at your fingertips. Google is in a snap versus, getting an actual physical newspaper. I love the newspaper because that's when I would read my comics. I thought it was, so funny. And when I got older, I got older in college, clipping coupons. Now I just use the coupons on my phone. But anyway, I digress. Very, very interesting newspaper articles. Okay. So the spiritualism, right? The paranormal was just a peak, okay, just peak right then and there. And for it to be advertised in the newspaper kind of just threw me for a loop there. But okay, so it's a flat wooden board, and like I said, it has the letters of the alphabet. And then you have numbers 0 through 9. Then you have the words yes and no that usually appear like in the top corners, and then goodbye, which is at the bottom. So then you have that little pointer, it looks like a little teardrop. And you're supposed to, oh, and then that little teardrop has a little circle. So it has a little window, right? And so that's how you maneuver the board. So literally the Ouija board is what it is that two or more people would sit around this board and you would lightly place your fingertips on this little, what is it? I know it's in my notes. What is this little thing? A planchette? So you put your fingertips on the little teardrop, the little planchette, and then you ask a question, okay? And then you watch in awe as this little planchette, this little teardrop moves from letter to letter, spelling out the answers, right? Up to your question. So to me, I was like, okay, so you gotta know how to spell. I know that sounds so stupid, right? But you got to learn how to spell and, really ask a solid question. And that's how they were born. That's how they were made um, then. And now they're still made similarly, except now a lot of the things instead of wood, it's plastic, You ain't gonna have no real wooden board coming out. So as the Ouija boards are becoming very popular, it's the device, this board itself, I guess you can call it a device. The magic of it, the mysticism of it was just so interesting and mysterious. And that's what caught everybody's attention. So it to me, I don't know, I was like, how is this a game? Because it's not like Monopoly, right? It doesn't, well, Monopoly, but um Monopoly, you have, you start and you finish. You do not pass go. Do not pass, get $200. You go to jail. You get boardwalk, whatever. Like there's a point, there's rules, right? And there's an end to the game, even though it feels endless. But this game, I'm doing little air bunnies, little air quotes. What is it? What are we trying to do besides connect ourselves with the unknown? That's what really got me. So when I was doing my research, as I'm reading, the obsession with spiritualism and the belief that the dead are able to communicate with the living was just it, like I said, it was an obsession. So it's like, you can still connect with those that have passed and moved, and have passed away, and those that maybe have a hard time moving on or maybe don't have closure would use this board to communicate, to link themselves to the other side. Now, I did read that there was an incident in upstate New York in 1848. Two sisters, Kate and Maggie Fox, claimed they had received messages from spirits who rapped the walls to answer their questions and later created this feat of channeling in parlors across the state. Yeah. So these stories by these two sisters and other spiritualists kept pushing the movement forward. And the spiritualism really did work for Americans because many believed that there was just this compatibility in holding a séance. So think about it this way, right? We're like, oh yeah, 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 Ouija boards. But even as humans, right now, some of us still feel the need to connect. Is my grandma watching over me? Can I still talk to someone that I lost, right? Am I getting messages from this person? And though we may not use a Ouija board, we still contact spirits through different ways of doing seances. Maybe we don't do it like we did in 1848, where we, have a table, we're all sitting with candles lit, um, a crystal ball in the middle with, someone who's channeling and connecting from the other side as, we're all holding hands. I mean, if you've watched the movie The Others, right? With Nicole Kidman, I love that movie. Or even Ghost with Patrick Swayze and Whoopi Goldberg. Like, okay, I mean, she was like faking it and she was selling it until she really was in contact with ghosts, right? But we do this through automatic writing, even if, different types of divination as well. So basically, this Ouija board is kind of like automatic writing, where we're just, writing and receiving messages from beyond. So I thought that was very interesting. You may be asking, who invented this Ouija board, Susie? I'm gonna tell you right now. So, when a few men in Baltimore started the Kennard Novelty Company, the first producers of the Ouija board, it was happened in the late 19th century. Opening the gates of hell was the last thing on their mind. I read that directly from my notes. Instead, they were mostly interested in opening America's wallets. So, as anything, they're just like, all right, let's put this out there and let's try to grab some people, let's grab their money. As spiritualism was starting to boom in American culture. So, all of this to say, could we reach spirits? Because when this was first created, no, right? It's just a game. It's not real. Um, Ouija is a way to connect, but it's nothing demonic. It's just a fun little game to play. I'm like, okay, very interesting. So as as I'm thinking about this, right, I was like, okay, but again, why did they think this was a cute game to play? As anything, consumerism, right? We're trying to get money from people, but again, I'm like a game. I guess that's what always confused me. And then I'm looking at the way that it's spelled, Ouija. Ouija. So when I was doing my research, Contrary to popular belief, Ouija is not a combination of the French word yes, which is oui, and the German equivalent for ja, J-A. So it was, according to my research, right? Because I was looking around, because even I was like, Ouija, what does that even mean? Bond's sister-in-law, Helen Peters, who was said to be a strong medium, who supplied now the instantly recognizable little handle. She asked the board what they should call it, and Ouija came through. The board also told her the word meant good luck. Now, to me, that's that's kind of creepy, right? How do I take that good luck? Like, shit, y'all, good luck with this shit. Good luck, y'all. It's like opening Pandora's box, right? Um, but there was a fact that Peters acknowledged that she was wearing a locket bearing a picture of a woman with the name Ouija written beside it. That's the story that emerged from the Ouija founders' letters. It was very possible that the woman in the locket was the famous author Ouida, Ouida, whom Peters admired, and that Ouija was just misreading of the name. So, I mean, according to all these interviews, descendants of the Ouija founders and, the original Ouija pageant file itself, which, you can find all over online, okay? The story of the board's patent request was true. The men knew that they wouldn't get their patent if they couldn't prove that the board worked. So Bond brought the indispensable Peters to the patent office in Washington, D.C. when he filed his application. Okay. There, the chief patent officer demanded a demonstration. If the board could accurately spell his name, which was supposed to be unknown to Bond and Peters, he'd allow the patent application to proceed. Yeah. So apparently, they all communed with the spirits. And that little teardrop, the little planchette, faithfully spelled out the patent officer's name. Now, whether it was the spirits or the fact that Bond, as a freaking patent attorney, may have simply known the man's name, we may never know. But it is what it is. So the first patent describes a device but offers no explanation as to how it works. Right? It's that ambiguity, right? Ambiguity that was part of more or less the way that they marketed it, right? So, yeah, it was a big money maker. And the why, people didn't really care because we don't really understand that the other side, right? The veil is thin, but we don't know how we can really connect with others of the why. But it became popular. Even now, more over 130 years later, the Ouija board is a success. It is just tapped into American culture. Now, whether you believe it's an oracle, right, as a connecting to the other side, or if it's just, I don't know, a good family fun entertainment, it still provides excitement. It still provides appeal from people across a wide spectrum of ages. I mean, we were playing Bloody Mary and light as a feather, stiff as a board. You know what I mean? We were telling spooky stories. So it's not too far-fetched to really think that the Ouija board is going to be popular as we can communicate with ghosts. You know what I mean? So I can totally buy it. So, glossing over my notes, over 5 months into 1944, as World War II, okay, is going on, A single New York department store sold 50,000 of the board. 50,000. In 1967, the year after Parker Brothers bought out the game, 2 million boards were sold. And get this, it outperformed Monopoly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This time, around this time in history, I mean, there was a lot going on. Vietnam, the race riots. It was just a lot happening. But the fact that the Ouija board was just flying off the shelves is just crazy. Hitting, I mean, American newspapers. In 1920, National Wire Services reported that would-be crime solvers were turning to their Ouija boards for clues in mysterious murder of the New York City gambler Joseph Brown Elwell, much to the frustration of the police. In 1921, the New York Times reported that a Chicago woman was sent to a psychiatric hospital after developing religious hallucinations, in quotes, induced by the Ouija board. This is how she described the situation. We started by getting sermons from the beyond. We have hundreds of these sermons that we typewrote and preserved. They are hidden away from prying eyes. These sermons grew more and more beautiful. All of them came from the Ouija board. I myself was doubtful. But after the Ouija board had been talking to us for days, we just had to believe. There were similar occasional appearances in the news for years. And I mean, it goes down. I have notes of like in 1930, a woman in Buffalo participated in a murder supposedly encouraged by the Ouija board messages. In 1941, a 23-year-old gas station attendant from New Jersey told the Times that he joined the army due to some spiritual advice. And when the recruitment office asked what gave him that advice, the idea of becoming a soldier, he answered, I want to learn a trade in the army school, and my Ouija board told me that the army was the place to do it. Wow. In 1956, a Connecticut judge heard the case of Helen Doe Peck, who left only $1,000 each to two former servants and a whopping $178,000 to John Gale Forbes over the spirit who was contacted via her Ouija board. So many stories like that, you guys. So if there was such a fascination, why is now we have the fear of the Ouija board, right? Because I'm reading, I'm like, all right, this is so interesting and it's mysterious. It's like, ooh, look at all these, people trying to like figure out, murders going on. But when did it become, besides the psychosis of the first person I read, right? Why are we very leery of it now? Well, in 1973, that year, The Exorcist, the movie, the OG movie, which is supposedly based on a true story, okay? That movie, I heard, and as I did my research, just scared the crap out of people, okay? And I remember being at a separate sleepover, and we weren't supposed to be watching that movie. My friend's parents were watching it, while we were supposed to be out, doing giggly little girl things, painting our toes or whatnot. And I remember we were like sneaking, like, what are they watching? What are they watching? And we saw it, we're like, hell no. We were little, okay? But so if, The Exorcist, right? The little kid was possessed. The implication was that 12-year-old Reagan, who was possessed by a demon after playing with the Ouija board by herself, is when people changed the way they saw the board. And since that film, it just that film scared the crap out of everybody. So now we see that we see the Ouija board as demonic, as crazy, as scary that that could happen to me. But that just literally changed the fabric of literally of pop culture. Isn't that mad? So literally, oh, like overnight, the Ouija board became the tool for the devil, right? It's demonic. And people ran with that. It just continually started popping up in scary movies, in TV shows. Um, and then it was obviously denounced by religious groups, and people were saying that it was Satan's preferred method of communication. And this is where I was seeing, because Alamogordo's pretty close to me. In 2001 in Alamogordo, New Mexico, it was burned in bonfires, okay, along with copies of Harry Potter and Disney's Snow White. And you know what? I'm sorry. It's New Mexico, that tracks. But reading in that, okay, reading in that, I literally, and I laughed my ass off. I want to say I saw this last year. So religious groups said, hell no, we're weary of this board. They can come up with they can come up with scripture, right? Denouncing all of this stuff, even with spirits and mediums and all that, whatever. But yet, they created a Ouija board to talk to Jesus. Have you all seen that? I need to look it up and hopefully I could um send that out on my socials. But yeah, but instead of it looking, like the traditional board where it looks a little bit spooky, no, it has like I think the box is blue and you see clouds and then you see a depiction of Jesus. And I'm just scratching my noggin on that. Like, wait, what? I'm sorry. First, it's Satan's work and demonic, and now it's like, well, now you can use this, but just probably just that one. You got to buy that one so that you can communicate with the Lord. And this is why I say, y'all, why? We see, we see, right, this religion. It's like, no, you can't do this thing. It's demonic, that paganism, it's the heathens. But they take that same thing and just repackage it. And I say it all the time, but it's just like Christmas, man. You know what I mean? It's, oh, bringing in the Christmas tree and hanging the stockings, and, Jesus was born. We all know Jesus was not born on Christmas, right? We all know that historically. We all know that bringing a Christmas tree into the house and putting the star or the angel on top, that has pagan roots, okay? And now look at what they did with the Ouija board. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind, but I'm not surprised. So now we come into the science of it, right? How does the Ouija board work? So, of course, science is like, well, it's not powered by spirits or demons. But there's scientists are still equally fascinated because they're powered by us. Even if we say, I'm not doing it, I'm not moving it, I swear, because as the thing starts moving, it's like, are you doing it? Are you moving? No, I'm not doing it. Heck, I just read a book. Oh, I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but The Ouija board was the spirit board. I don't think they called it Ouija board, but they called it a talking board. The spirit board was in the book itself to channel a message from this shadow that kept following this woman around, trying to get her attention. Isn't that wild? Now, it's just like as I do pendulum readings, right? I'm asking the question, it's moving. And just like the pendulum, someone can say, well, you have these micro movements in your arm and in your hand, and even though you think you're not doing it, those movements might be from that. And then I can say, yeah, but what if I put it in a case and knock on it and then ask the question? It's going to move different ways. There can always be some kind of, what is it? Magic is science that can't be explained just yet. So we can obviously look at the psychology of it, right? Or we can really look at it as the whole social context. Maybe those in the group that's asking the Ouija board the question has a slight influence. You can think of the energy that all these people are bringing together in moving the little teardrop planchette around, getting answers. But the Ouija board can also tell us so much about ourselves. Maybe it can or can't get us answers from beyond the veil, right? Maybe we are wanting to see and hear what we want to see and hear. But the truth of the matter is if we're grounded and we're actually really reaching out, we want to try to like understand it, right? Because we fear what we don't understand. And yeah, it can be extremely spooky. Because then we think, if we're a total skeptic, right? All right, let me do whatever. And it's like, all right, was there batteries in this thing? Who's moving it? But it's magic, right? How can you explain that? We can't just yet. I just think it's freaking cool. Um, there is one thing that I did find interesting. So there have been experiments on how the Ouija board works, right? So participants were told that they were playing with a person in another room via teleconferencing, and it was a robot. The robot, they were told, mimicked movements of the other person. In reality, the robot's movements simply amplified the participant's motions, and the person in the other room was just a ruse, a way to get the participant to think that they weren't in control. So, participants were asked a series of yes or no fact-based questions, and they expected to use the Ouija board to answer. But what the team found surprised them. When the participants didn't know the answers, but hazard a guess without using the Ouija board, they thought they were right around 50% of the time. A typical result for guessing. But when they guessed using the board, believing the answers were coming from someplace else, they answered correctly upwards to 65% of the time. And in quotes, it was dramatic. It was so dramatic how much better they did on these questions than if they have answered to best of their ability, that they were like, this is just weird. How could they be so much better? It was so dramatic, we couldn't believe it, said a scientist. The implication was that one's non-conscious was a lot smarter than anyone knew. So, researchers still are intrigued by it. They still pursue further on the Ouija research. And I think that is so amazing, right? That we are just wanting an answer to get this closure. And of course, people are going to complain that the other person's moving the little teardrop around. It's not me. But to know that you do so much better with the Ouija board on answering questions that you don't really think you know, but something inside you does know, and the Ouija helps you answer, to me is so fascinating. I loved reading up on the Ouija board. I thought it was so interesting. A lot of things that I didn't even obviously fathom. It was in the newspaper, and the dramatic switch from everyone just indulges in this thing, right? We're so curious about it and we want to use it. It's a tool. And then, boom, something like The Exorcist just turns the world upside freaking down, and now it's evil and demonic. Isn't that so wild? This is a teachable moment. How fear and knowing that you use this Ouija board, right? And you're enjoying it, having fun with it. And then you go see this movie and now you're like, oh no, that's demonic. I can't believe I haven't did that in the first place. I'm sorry, what? Because that's what Hollywood feeds us, right? That's what we saw, that's what we ingested, and then they just freaking ran with it. And when that came out, then you have, Christians saying, no, this is demonic, and look at this scripture, and you got to burn it. And then the whole thing of like, you shouldn't be reading the Harry Potter book series. And I remember that. And I remember that other movie that came out. Oh, it's at the tip of my tongue. But I remember the Catholic Church and just coming out and saying, you Catholics should not watch this movie. It is against the religion. Don't you go watch it, which is so crazy to me. And that's when I have a hard time with organized religion like that. Why don't you want me to? Well, now you piqued my interest. Why don't you want me to watch it? What do you mean this is against my religion? What in this movie is against my religion if it's entertainment? You know what I mean? So I can't even remember the movie. That's how much I was like, whatever. But that fear is what just went topsy-turvy on everything. Can you imagine what someone might say, like something demonic about Monopoly or something? It's so damn long, man. But I'm just thinking, like, oh my goodness, we're gonna turn the world upside down over Monopoly next. If we start believing that, I'm gonna get, I can't remember. I cannot stand Monopoly. My poor little attention span just cannot. Um, but you know, Boardwalk is my, if I'm on Boardwalk, that means I'm just gonna hit the stock market big. I don't know. Just crazy things. I had so much fun. This was a good one. I learned a lot from learning about the Ouija board. So now I'm curious. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget that you can hit me up in the show notes. They're all linked below. Um, just for easy accessibility. You can even hit me up on my socials, y'all, or send me an email. I'm Susie's Enchanted Crossroads at gmail.com. On Instagram and TikTok, you can find me on there. But yeah, until next time, I will see you at the crossroads.